Okay. Oh, sure. We'll come in. Oh, things on.
Presidential Library and Museum, and we are thrilled to have you here at another Clinton Presidential Center Presents event. And the CPCP is a partnership among the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton School of Public Service, and the Clinton Presidential Library. Our primary guest today is Dick Batchelor, and Dick was elected to the Florida House of Representatives in 1974, and at that point he was one of the youngest individuals ever to serve in that body. During that period, he chaired a number of the chamber's most important committees. Following his service in the legislature, Dick became a political strategist and a political analyst in Florida across a period of significant political change in that state. As a consultant, Dick is also a successful business person, showing success in that arena as well. His knowledge of international affairs also has garnered recognition from the White House, including presidential appointments as a delegate to observe elections in South Africa and as a delegate to the United Nations Human Rights Commission. In his new book, Building Bridges in Toxic Political Times, Dick draws on a lifetime of these personal experiences as a unifier in different contexts across his life and career. And in the book, Dick discusses using real-life examples how to address difficult conversations, move towards meaningful compromise, and achieve lasting solutions. Certainly incredibly timely conversations. You can purchase copies of Building Bridges outside the room after the program, and Dick will be more than happy to sign multiple copies of the books. 'Tis the season. The conversation today, of course, will be moderated by Stephanie Street, the Executive Director of the Clinton Foundation and my partner in work here at the Clinton Presidential Center. Stephanie and Dick, take it away. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much, Jay. And thanks for your great partnership. You know, as we reflect on things we're thankful for here at the end of the year, I am so thankful to have such incredible colleagues at the National Archives, Dr. Jay Barth and Vicki Soda, who's the Dean of the Clinton School. The three of us together have really aligned our priorities, and having conversations like this, bringing these to the public, are things that we do together, and we're very proud and pleased to have you here today, Dick.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to be here.
I'd like to start, well, first of all, I don't know if you know, the title is very appropriate, Building Bridges, for so many reasons, but Little Rock is the city of bridges, the 6 bridges. President Clinton, you know, in the second term, talked a lot about the bridge to the 21st century. This building we're in is supposed to shape like a bridge. You have the bridging of the old and the new, the old Choctaw building, the 1899 with this new, well, this is not new construction, it's now 20 years old. But I love sort of the bridging metaphors, and I love the title, Building Bridges in Toxic Political Times. It's a very timely conversation we're having today, and when we scheduled this several months ago, we didn't realize how timely it was. The book is really arranged in a very unique way. It seems to me it's kind of like a bridge building toolkit, or you call it a roadmap. Talk to us about why you organized it this way.
Well, I started writing the book. First of all, there's bridge building going on. The metaphor is here. In fact, maybe I'll build a bridge or two between here and some of the younger people today and talking about bridge building. When I started writing the book, working on the book, it was about 2 years ago. And there were, of course, a lot of toxicity then, but not like it is today. And then when the elections came and went, we basically acknowledged that the toxicity level is higher, and I don't see it getting any better, unfortunately. We could talk about some about that. But how do you reach across the, and this is not like a kumbaya. I'm not like, hey, peace out, we're going to all get together and we're all going to agree. It doesn't work that way. When you try to convene around something you can agree on. So number one step is find something you do agree on. You might not agree on the choice issue, who's going to be president. It could be a host of issues that you just don't agree on. But are there issues you can convene around that are not necessarily partisan that you can find agreement on and come together on? If you recall, President Bush and President Clinton got together after the earthquakes in Haiti and raised a tremendous amount of money reaching across the aisle. They were both out of office, but they were still, of course, Global Initiative was in play at the time, and still is, of course. So they reached across the aisle. But let me give you some examples if I could. But first, let me tell you, there's some people you don't invite to these meetings. I mean, again, it's not kumbaya. Everybody doesn't get invited to convene around an issue if they don't agree. If they're innately opposed to what you're trying to do, they just don't need to be in the room. But let me give you a couple of examples. 2002, our school board came to me and said, look, we have 138 schools in some state of disrepair. Most of them are actually falling down. There's nothing, we have no money. Well, what can we do? They said we've tried 6 times over 20 years to pass a local sales tax by referendum to fund new schools construction. Then they hastened to point out, and every time they failed. I said, so you want me to lead this effort that's already failed 6 times? Thank you so much, I appreciate it. The confidence level that you have. But I said, I will do it because there was a need that was unmet. And this is an issue that you could set aside your differences. In fact, the first step, I recruited a former Republican, long-term Republican congressman to be my co-chairman. So we had a Democrat and a Republican co-chairman. Then another thing, we have a group called Axe the Tax, which was opposing the tax. But fortunately, we were able to reach across the aisle and really mitigate against that opposition. And we were bringing the whole community together. And when I say the whole community, Hispanic community, the Asian community, the African-American community, faith community, the corporate community, the not-for-profit community, philanthropy, we brought everybody to the table. And my rule of thumb was, somebody said, how do I get on your steering committee? I said, show up. If you show up, you've got a level of interest, you're on the steering committee, so you can be engaged with us. Well, we had a lot of opposition, but we passed that sales tax by about 58% of the vote, which is unheard of for a tax to pass that had bipartisan support. And then in 2014, they came back to me and said, we'd like to do it one more time. So I raised $500,000, and we extended that $500,000 sales tax. And then that tax combined raised $4.5 billion to build new schools, $4.5 billion. And the last thing I was telling you, they came to me this year, back in the fall, and said, we need to do it again. We don't have all the schools rebuilt. And now it was 20 years ago when we did our first one, and some of those need repair, so we need to come back and do the tax one more time. I said, well, I'll do it one more time, because if you do it every 10 years, the next 10 years from now, either I won't be here or I won't care. I might care, but we'll see. But we passed it, and the Republican Party endorsed it. The Republican Party actually endorsed the tax along with the Democratic Party for the first time, Republican Party, and we passed it by 72% of the vote. So the last point I'll make is combine that tax over the 2003 to 2024, combined will raise $8.5 billion. And again, if it was a partisan issue and people were toxic about it, and there were some, of course, but we convened the right people around the table, almost unlimited invitation. But we found an issue that we could convene around, that we could have reached agreement on, notwithstanding those other issues out there that we don't agree on.
Great. Thank you. That's really helpful to sort of hear how you practically, practice what you preach, if you will. And looking at sort of, it's a great read. It's an easy read, but it's a very practical read. Each chapter, you lay out a strategy, and then you go through, and the first chapter, you talk about 3 truths, and at the end of every chapter, you have key takeaways. So it really is a how-to guide. why did you decide to write it like that, or why did you decide to organize it this way versus just writing about your experiences?
Well, it's a very good question because I thought about that when I was approached many times to write a book, and decided, well, it's going to be about me, but no one wants to read about me. I could do that. Hillbilly Elegy, maybe I could do that. My upbringing is somewhat like that. And let me make a point here because I'm going to answer your question, but touring this library reminded me so much of somebody asked me, in fact, Wayne, who was kind enough to pick me up last night and today, asked me, how did you get around Bill Clinton? And I'm going to use that example because, frankly, he has been such an influence on what I've done. And so in 1992, and I will share this with you, and my friend who drove here I'll tell you, we were at UNESCO together, appointed by Bill Clinton in 1995. And so it's a small, small world and keep in touch. But one of the things in the book I talk about is you don't have to be who people think you are. I grew up in North Carolina. My parents were tenant farmers, sharecroppers. We raised tobacco. And if you don't know what sharecropping is, of course you do it from Arkansas, you know what sharecropping is, or Alabama too. But we're sharecroppers. And I never met a black person except they were field hands. And there were always discussion around our dinner table from our relatives about being members of the Klan. So that's why I say you don't have to be what people think you are or what you were. You know, how did you go from that? I ended up, as mentioned in the legislature, I worked on civil rights issues. I passed a lot of civil rights issues. I ended up being chairman of the Urban League, which is the second oldest African-American organization in the country. And that reminds me a lot of Bill Clinton, and I know he's got an exhibit here. He's got the Little Rock Nine. Mm-hmm. And I guess that took him back to those stages during the Eisenhower administration, you know, where he grew up and saw some of that too, and dealing with, I'm sure, Klan and what power groups in certain parts of the state, and not unlike North Carolina. So it really meant that, so when he announced to run for office, he had already done a lot of these things. And so I said, well, that's somebody I want to support for president. Mm-hmm. As a quick sidebar, I actually did his first fundraiser in 1992, and for breakfast and asked 100 people to give me $100 to see what the governor of Arkansas looked like, because no one thought he could ever win. They were wrong. I was right, fortunately, in hindsight. So I got to know him, but obviously, just watching him as governor, I was very intrigued by both he and Madam Secretary.
Madam Secretary. She's had a few titles.
That's
yes.
the highest priority, though, Madam Secretary. Excuse me. So I was very impressed what he did as governor, very impressed with his speech, very impressed, and of course, very, very impressed with what he did as president for 2 terms. So I say that because we're sitting in the library, and I just want to acknowledge that he's been such an influence on well, you know this, so many people, and myself included. So
he's a great man.
But
yeah.
let me answer your question. I didn't answer your question. I'm going back to being a recovering politician. I didn't answer a question.
I'll keep asking it in a different way until you answer
I thought I got
it.
the benefit. So the answer to answer your question.
Organization of your book.
Somebody did ask me about if you're a recovering politician or you're in a 12-step recovery program. I said no. For recovery politician, it's 2-step. It's a sidestep. It's a very very quick step. But I put the book this way because I wanted people to walk away, and I've got anecdotes in there, including one I just shared with you about life and how it relates and legislation I worked on, those kind of things. How do you convene and reach across the aisle? But I wanted to do it like a roadmap so people could take it would be a practical book. You can read this book, and no matter the issue, may I use one more issue as an example?
Please, no, I think it's...
So I'm co-chairman of the Project Opioid. Excuse me. How do you convene the public around something like opioids? And now fentanyl. Everything is spiked with fentanyl now, including marijuana, in a lot of cases. And fentanyl is 50 times more powerful than heroin. Now, it does not discriminate. It'll kill a Republican, it'll kill a Democrat, and no party affiliation. So there's an issue that you can convene around. Now, what we might think about, like legalization of marijuana, that was on the ballot in Florida, did not get 60% of the vote. But you know, the governor was opposed to it. Trump was in favor of it. So it was an interesting issue. But that was a bigger issue. Well, I shouldn't say bigger issue. It was a more highlighted issue. But it's okay, back up, say, okay, but now we got fentanyl deaths around this community. We've got thousands of people dying in communities throughout the country. So can we convene around that? Forget about your political credentials, or even on the legalization of marijuana. That's not the issue. The issue is here, can we convene around this issue, come up with a programmatic approach to trying to reduce the number of deaths? And the answer is yes, we've done that. But again, that's another example where, again, the issue of primacy, we're dealing with death. So that sets aside and kind of insulates you from a partisan approach to it.
You touched on this at the beginning of our conversation, but obviously the recent presidential election really highlighted the major divisions in our country. Drawing on your experience, will you share some strategies, some of what you think are the most constructive and effective strategies for finding common ground with someone who you may be completely in disagreement about 90% of the issues? How do you do that with someone?
I wish I had an answer where you go, well, that was brilliant and encouraging, but the facts are what the facts are, and we could talk about the proverbial elephant in the room again. It's going to be more difficult because people now who are in power are very, very strident about what their roles are, what their positions are. You know, if you go back to 1994, remember?
Oh, yes, I remember that year very well.
1994 with Newt Gingrich, and the book he wrote was Contract for America. I called it Contract on America. And that's what you see now, this Project 2025 is the same kind of thing. And so you've got the House and Senate and the White House controlled by one party, but they don't have to negotiate. I'm going to give you another example. In Florida, there's a supermajority of Republicans in the House and Senate. When you have a supermajority, you can waive the rules, you can propose constitutional amendments, you can do anything. You don't need the minority. And unfortunately, we're going back to 1994, I think, with Newt Gingrich, and the Senate was Republican, the House was Republican. And now I think we're at a point in time where I have to say that the Supreme Court is partisan. And it's just what it is. So the only hope I think we have, one of the hopes that we have, I think, is that if people are not satisfied with what happens over the next 2 years, maybe the House will be taken over by Hakeem Jeffries. He'll be Speaker of the House. At least we'll have one guardrail controlling one house of the Congress. But I still hope there's some overtures on the issues about coming together. But when you get a supermajority like you have, you're less inclined. And I think that's been evidenced, frankly, by very few U.S. senators basically assuming the role is advice and consent and want to actually interview the nominees for cabinet positions and agency positions because of nominate them, just do it. So I think that's extremely dangerous, but I think the American public thinks it is too. There's a recent poll out that shows the American public is not satisfied with the candidates, and they do want to go through a confirmation process so we can put some, what do they say, the best descent, I guess the best thing is in public policy is a little sunshine, open it up, tell the truth, deal with the truth. But I'm really concerned about it. I wish I had a better answer. I wish I had a more encouraging answer that got across the aisle. But I think my final note is this. I think because of that, it makes empowering people at the local level more important. You know, if the federal government's doing this on an issue, why can't you be doing something totally different if you convene around an issue and not convene around the partisanship of it? Again, I wish I had a more encouraging answer, but I just don't think I would be candid if I gave you a different answer.
You know, compromise and consensus used to be something that was sort of typical and normal and honorable in public service, but it seems like people have gotten away from that. But going forward, specifically for people on the front lines of policy making, are there some qualities that you think are essential for someone who is a consensus builder, like President Clinton, or even President Clinton and Newt Gingrich back in the day were able to find consensus? What are the qualities that you see in people that make good consensus builders?
You alluded to it, I think, but intelligence is one of them. But I think you've got to be confident in who you are and what you're trying to do. You've got to be comfortable in your policies that you're advocating and be able to stand the ground. I still think facts will matter. So I think people who take the lead, but a lot of this is going to really depend on some of the Republican leadership in the House and the Senate to basically say, these are issues that we can reach across the aisle on, we want to reach across the aisle on. They don't have to because they've got the majority. It's a very slim majority in the House. I think there's 5 votes. But it's going to be incumbent upon some of the Republicans to take a deep breath. The Mitt Romney, who's leaving, but the Mitt Romney types of the U.S. Senate to say, let's take a deep breath here. We've kind of had our fun. We've gone through this phase, but now it's going to be serious. Just like, excuse me, I'm sorry. Just like we were talking over the last few days about some of the nominees, and you almost want to call them and say, you might want to be careful what you pray for. If you want to be Secretary of Defense, somebody needs to tell you that is an $878 billion agency with 3 million employees. So you might have the title, you know, but can you run an agency? I know that Trump in his first administration had Rex Tillerson, who was the chairman of the board of Exxon. Well, he's running a big corporation. There's some experience there, and you know, talk about reorganizing the military, reorganizing the Department of Defense. So I think I had to go back and re-answer the question. I think you've got to be confident. You've got to be smart, in my opinion. I think you've got to be confident in your facts, and really facts are really the only sword you have in these kind of debates. You've got to really persist at facts. As an example, again, I wish I had maybe it's today, but you know, Robert Kennedy Jr., who I debated back in 1980, by the way. I was a surrogate for Jimmy Carter. He was a surrogate for Ted Kennedy, and we debated in Ocala, Florida. Little did I know that he was going to be changing so drastically, but he just asked one of his lawyers to rescind the approval for polio vaccine. I mean, it's
Why
hard.
would you pick that as an issue out of the gate? Like,
Sorry?
I'm just saying that. Yeah, that was shocking and surprising. You think that would be something consensus was built, and the facts and the data and the evidence is there that it works. It seems very odd that.
Well, and then there's polio now throughout the world, but particularly in Africa. But if you go back to it, if you want to replace the NIH and then restructure it and really dismantle it, keep in mind that there were 100 Nobel Awards presented to people at NIH for their discovery of vaccines. So, but I hopefully, and maybe this just I'm trying to be encouraging enough to say, hopefully the facts will matter. Hopefully the NIH and Nobel Prize winners can come forward and say, no, look, you can't do this. You can't do away with the vaccine for polio. You just can't. And then other things you want to do. So I just hope the intellect but the only thing you can do is be smart and be prepared and have the facts on your side and have defensible facts on your side and get around the table. That's all you can do is argue your point.
Again, obviously, we live in a very divided time, and people tend to stay in their own lanes or their own silos or their own echo chambers. What do you think keeps people from leaving their sort of ideological comfort zones and working together to find solutions? How do we get people to break out of those silos?
A very good question. I think, you know, when people say a very good question, that gives you time to answer. Think
about what you're going to answer.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very, 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 very good question. So, I'm going to answer it this way. it's difficult. It's funny, if you look at you've got social conservatives, you've got economic conservatives, let's say, in the Republican Party, and you've got economic conservatives in the Democratic Party. So there's some commonality, there, and they focus on economic issues. And I get that, I understand that, it's very defensible, and you can have a good conversation, a robust conversation about economics and fiscal policy and tariffs and all those kind of things. But there is an element out there that just hard-nosed, probably 30% of the element just hard-nosed support the incoming president on anything. And there's also, it's probably not encouraging either, but say there's a term I come up with, and maybe it's not original at all, but it's called intellectual laziness. Somebody gets up in the morning, they turn on the news of their choice, and they listen to it, and they regurgitate it throughout the day. And if you approach them and say, have you thought about this? And no, I don't want to think about that. I know where I am. So there are some people, and you could apply that to the far left. Maybe some in the squad and other people like that, maybe they're intellectually lazy too, in that it's just that I've got my position, this is my position, I'm comfortable in this position, I don't want to change, I don't even want to hear about another one. So you've got those elements, but fortunately those elements I think are small elements, and the majority is willing to listen, and that's why I think you've just got to stay, in the fight, you've got to stay in the arena, and the best thing you've got going for you is just facts, truth.
In your book here, strategy number 5, which I found very, I don't know, it came home to me because it talked about you said strategy number 5 is about making people the priority.
Right.
Well, as you remember in the 92 campaign, President Clinton his phrase was putting people first, and that really has been his guiding principle throughout his entire life in public service. Tell me what you mean in this book specifically, where you're talking about making people the priority, and how can we collectively and individually work on that?
And it basically, people will convene with you if they think you give credibility or credence to their opinion, right? So you have to listen to people, and maybe they are going to tell you things you really don't want to hear. But you've got to listen to them, because that person, if you don't make the individual the priority, if you don't make that person feel that they're validated because you understand, I didn't say totally agree with them, but you understand their position, give them some validation. Otherwise, they don't come to the table in a meaningful way. So that's what I'm saying. You've got to make people first. So, and again, I think, in the public policy sector, I think that's where if we can drill down any debate as it impacts individual people, you can, because in the end, that's what it's about. It's supposed to be about public service. It's supposed to be about this. In the end, you've got to equate what is this public policy? How does it impact people, and all kinds of people? Now, and I think that's becoming even more important now, because, diversity, equity, inclusion used to be something that you would proudly talk about and companies would embrace and spend money on, and now maybe some people would, well, maybe not diversity, but equity and inclusion. And then others in the state of Florida, basically the governor passed legislation to prohibit companies from even having DEI, which I said from day one as a non-lawyer is unconstitutional. You can't tell a private company, what they can do and what they can't do with their employees. But so the point is that I hope we don't walk away. I hope we don't get into the defeatist attitude and walk away from those debates that are still very much worth having, whether it's DEA, civil rights issues, gay rights, however you might encapsulate human rights. But I hope we don't get to the point to say, well, let's not talk about those issues anymore. Again, I get back to it. You got to put a face on it. And I always said that as an advocate, you always have to put a face on the issue and make it human, and then talk about it that way. Not how a program impacts somebody, but how the impact of that program effectuates a change with that individual person.
Well, it's interesting because I know just from my own personal experience, or looking at my parents, I give them so much credit. They grew up in the 50s, but they evolved their thinking. My dad used to laugh and say that's because he had 3 sort of lefty, liberal, off the radar screen daughters that he was able to evolve into where he ended up. But you also said something else I think is important. Knowing someone, or if you're trying to explain a policy position, a lot of times people will tune you out, or like you said, they don't understand. It doesn't affect me, so I don't really care. Right. But when someone has someone in their family that's affected by a policy, that seems to move people to when they come up close, when they see it affecting someone that they care about. I've noticed on a lot of different of these sort of controversial or social issues that seem to take up all the airtime, when people understand or know someone who's affected, that seems to obviously move the needle.
It does, and that's, maybe I get back to the whole DEI and civil rights issue again, the whole genre of civil rights. And you want it to be personal, and it is personal. That's what I think you have to get back to. Even something as controversial as, transsexuality, people fight that from a basis of public policy, but it really, what does that do to the individual? What is the impact on the individual? So again, I hope we can go back to that. We have to advocate. I think what's going on in Washington now just begs for local leaders to really be very active and very vocal about where they stand on issues. I think it gets back to, you got to focus on the individual and the impact on the individual, whatever the rights might be. And I think if you boil it down to a rights issue, I think you can have a fairly sane conversation with people.
I'd like to talk about your truth number 8, keep your cool. As we approach the holiday season, we just came out of Thanksgiving, and we've seen how families have been torn apart from having such deep divisions in their own beliefs. I survived Thanksgiving, and now, again, we're headed into the holiday season. Do you have any tips for keeping your cool around the family dinner table?
Don't talk politics. That's the way that in my family, we had dinner the other night with some couples that my wife is closer to me, but I'm close to them. We get together every Christmas, and they're MAGA supporters, and I should say Republicans, maybe not MAGA supporters, but they have their politics. And I said, before we get to dinner, there will be no discussion about politics, because you can't. You can. I mean, just stick with the turkey on the table. But I just tell them, and in fact, I've got a brother who's, it was 180 degrees from where I am on everything. And I would say, well, you're my brother. I love you. Merry Christmas. Good to see you. Let's break bread together and talk about old times when you shot me in the eye with a BB gun, stuff like that. I just rule of thumb, because you can't, because some people are so infatuated with their politics, they just really want to push it. And I just basically say, it's uncomfortable, I don't want to do it. I just say, the rule of thumb, we just don't talk politics over dinner. Now, if you are sitting there having a drink with somebody, said, can we talk about this issue? And I'm just fine, have the conversation. But I think when you try to bring it around a dinner table when you're trying to celebrate it, it really doesn't work, I don't think.
Well, I'm going to push you on that a little bit, because, again, we're building bridges in toxic political times, and inevitably those issues are going to come up around the dinner table. So in that case, and you talk about a lot of the strategies here in sort of public life or in political and Washington, D.C., how do you bring some of those same strategies to the dinner table so you can have a civil conversation about a particular issue? What are some tactics, if you will, when a conversation like that comes up to model sort of how to have a civil conversation?
I would first of all reconvene and say we've had dinner. Now, if you want to talk politics, let's go over here and have an eggnog or whatever you want to do. Maybe Spike will be better.
We call it Catholic eggnog in my house.
There you go. There you go. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
we have the.
And then basically that's having. But I always put a preemptor to it. I basically say, like, if you want to talk politics, you didn't ask me my opinion, but you're asking me. We're gonna discuss opinions there. We'll just have a conversation. It can't be a personal conversation. It's got to be political, public policy, that kind of conversation, rather than he's a good guy, he's a bad guy, she's a bad guy, whatever it might be. So I would not do it at the dinner table. I said, but if somebody wants to talk politics afterwards, I think the arena for those discussions can be challenging if they're around the dinner table. I really do.
We've had successful conversations around my dinner table when my father was alive. He's no longer here, because there were some ground rules set at the very beginning that we weren't going to shout, no one was going to raise their voices, and that we have to start from a place of mutual respect. And you have to be able to defend what you're saying with facts, not quoting a particular, MSNBC or Fox News. There had to be sort of facts. And sort of he was like the referee when things got out of hand.
You just disqualified the whole conversation.
Yeah.
But as an example, I'm going to be very candid. I've got a brother who's a racist, homophobic, xenophobic.
And you still love him.
I still have him, but I'm not going to talk politics with him under any conditions. I'm just not going to.
Yeah. That would be difficult. It probably was easier around my dinner table because we all generally were pretty much aligned, except, there were some sort of social issues that my parents had different viewpoints on, but we...
And I accept the invitation.
Okay, perfect.
I'll see you at dinner.
I'll see you. All right. I think we've got about 22 coming for Christmas, so I'll leave a...
I'll cut the turkey.
You talked a little bit at the beginning, we've talked about President Clinton and quoting him. How did you meet President Clinton? Like, where did you meet and how did you all become friendly? I noticed he has the first quote in your book, and he's quoted on the cover as well. So talk about the first time or how you met.
Well, I mentioned I did the fundraiser for him in Orlando, and I was telling somebody earlier I was again impressed because he walked out of the fundraising breakfast and got on the phone with Chelsea working on an algebra problem. I said, well, that's a sort of good day. That was very, very impressive. I have a funny story. So I got to know he and Hillary both during the campaign at different events around the state of Florida primarily, but other states too. And I didn't raise that much money. In fact, when I spent the night at the White House, which I'll tell you about in a second, but when I did, the Washington Post did this big feature on people who spent the night in the White House and how much money they'd given and blah, blah, blah. I told the reporter, says, do not tell how little I raised, because all these people who raise $1 million, they're going to be really mad that they get invited to the White House because I only raised a little bit of money. But anyway, so I got to know him, and my wife was a news anchor for NBC affiliate in Orlando and couldn't be involved in politics. So I got an email, not an email, this is, maybe it was a fax.
It wasn't an email. He only,
fax.
yeah.
It was a fax.
It was a fax. That was the highest level of technology back in those days.
From the First Lady saying, President, I would like to invite you and your wife to spend the night in the White House. Well, I was obviously delighted. But my wife, being a news anchor, I sent her the invitation to the TV station. I says, too bad you can't be involved in politics, because I have been invited to spend the night in the White House. She immediately called and tried to explain to me that when he was running, that was politics, but now
that he was the president,
I can go. So we spent the night in the White House and in the Queen's bedroom, and the president had Larry King and his girlfriend. He had his barber from Little Rock, I think, that was there that night. Who was also
who?
Yeah, it was his barber.
Oh yes, Jim Miles.
Yeah,
yeah.
He was there too. So we did that, and then the funny part of the story is that I said I used to run all the time, and I used to have a 5K run called Run for the Children, and we raised money to treat abused children. And I said, I'm going to go run with the president. He's going to ask me to run, I'm sure. Fingers crossed. So he did. So we go down and get in the limousine the next morning. Of course, to say he's late, was that just redundant?
Now, come on.
You're late.
I was the scheduler, so let's,
So he came down, we got in the limousine. My wife's sitting in the back of the limousine in the jump seat. The president's there, I'm there. Of course, we're leaving the White House, go down to the Potomac, we're going to run. Well, I'm running with the president, and of course, what do you say to the president of the United States when you're jogging with him? I'm saying, so I look around at all the Secret Service. I said, Mr. President, who said it is not safe to jog in Washington? it is the day. So a few minutes later, I said, well, Mr. President, I had some minor surgery a few weeks ago, so I'm really not feeling up to finishing this run. So I got back in the limousine, and I got the white hair and stuff, and people obviously knew it was a presidential limousine. I'm like, they're waving at people.
Oh, that's funny.
I was really good.
I thought you
really
were.
bad. But he was very good to me. He appointed me, I mentioned UNESCO in Paris when he did the Human Genome Project. And then he appointed me to the United Nations Human Rights Commission in Geneva, Switzerland. I was there for 6 weeks working on human rights violations. In fact, I delivered the resolution condemning Russia for invading of Chechnya. Now figure what, where we are today with that. And then the most important thing he gave me, there was what they call, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's called the Presidential Election Observer Delegation, where countries would invite a president from another country to come observe their elections, their free elections. Jimmy Carter did a lot of that in Central America through the Carter Center after then. But Jesse Jackson was the chairman of the delegation.
Okay.
And we were briefed by Tony Lake, and we flew over and met with Nelson Mandela the night before he was elected.
Oh, how thrilling.
And that was, so if I tell you that to build up to the crescendo, meeting Nelson Mandela had to be the most, other than meeting Bill Clinton, was the most important thing that I ever had a chance to do. Somebody did say as a final, they said, what did you say to Mandela? I'm going like, I don't think I said anything. I might have said, congratulations, great to be in your country, but I didn't. I was so awestruck. What do you say to a man who just got out of prison after 28 years and the first post-apartheid president? So I had some, so the president's been very good to me, and I joined the Clinton Foundation, which I thoroughly enjoy, and still stay in touch. And he was down in town recently. He had a speech the day before the election down in Orlando in Eatonville. So he's very, very kind and very nice, and been very, very generous to me. So I'm very thankful.
You mentioned Nelson Mandela. What a bridge builder. You think about President Clinton references often that he even asked Nelson Mandela, how on earth did you put people in your cabinet that imprisoned you for that time? And so just that action and that, he said it freed him in his own heart and his mind to be able to do that, and to also build that bridge to show people that he was going to govern in a way that everybody had a seat at the table. So
look at to your point, look at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission chaired by Desmond Tutu.
Right.
And you basically said, if you come forward and can confess of your crimes, we'll forgive you. How do you do that? I mean, these are people who came forward and basically said, I murdered your family members. I mean, it was just, but I mean, that's the pinnacle of truth and reconciliation, that whole reconciliation and bridge building. I mean, that has got to be the epitome of it at that level.
We have a few minutes left, so I want to ask the audience members if they have any questions, and then I'll ask the final question, but we're opening it up. Right here.
Hello, I'm Glenn White. I'm with the Braver Angels organization here in Arkansas, and I was hoping that you know a little bit about Braver Angels. It's a national organization that's working to reduce political polarization, and I think they have some things that would be helpful when you're talking about how to have those difficult conversations across the family dinner table, because they actually have a number of workshops. One of them is specific on family and politics. They also teach a lot of individual communication techniques to make those difficult conversations easier. And I think at the core of all of that is having people talk across the divide in a way that helps develop relationships. They start to learn that the other person is a complicated individual. They're not this ugly stereotype that we create when we stick with our social media algorithms or Fox News. So I was wondering if you've had any familiarity with Braver Angels and done anything with them, because I think you'd find it a very helpful complement to what you're doing.
Tell me the name of the organization?
Braver Angels.
Is there a website or something
Yep,
you can share with us?
braverangels.org.
Braverangels.org.
National organization, a lot of really good work being done there.
I want to make a point, and I'll look that up, but I've learned that convening with the faith community is helpful because it helps to tap down, some of the animosity. So you've got the faith community. For instance, in our community, we have a gentleman named Allen Ginsberg, who's just a phenomenal man, Jewish, and he convened around the conflict in the Middle East when right after the Hamas went into Israel. And he had the Palestinian Alliance from the campus, University of Central Florida in Orlando. He had the students from the Jewish organization, Halal, I think it was Halal, was involved. But he had imams, he had Baptists, he had all kinds of faith leaders. So the conversation we had was, I think, more productive because you had the faith leaders there and they were looking at it from a faith standpoint. That kind of mitigated against the animosity that's usually there. So I've learned having the faith community at the table, and just like on the issue dealing with fentanyl, we had the faith community at the table because if you look at human resource developments at the company, they're the first ones to know about some kind of drug issue in the family, but also faith leaders, particularly in the Orlando area. There's an Institute of Justice and Peace, and it's all the faith leaders come together. So thank you.
That's interesting because we at the foundation as well have been working in sort of the opioid addiction space, and we found as well that one of the most effective ways to get the message out about the harmfulness of mixing alcohol and opioids is through the faith community, and we've gone across the country and organized faith leaders in specific communities to learn how to talk about this issue to their congregation because they're trusted messengers. So that is, I agree with you that that's a really great is to get the faith community involved. Yes.
Hi, so continuing that idea or thought on faith, could you talk about faith in government? So I was having a conversation with my daughter last night, and it got rather heated because I realized during the conversation that she had lost all faith in government. And I think her point of view probably is representative of a lot of young people who don't see that government is really reflective of their thoughts, and they don't see their thoughts, ideas, or themselves being reflected in the political parties. And when you opened your discussion, you talked about people being invited to the table who were at least interested. How do you invite people who no longer have faith in government to be part of the process? What does that look like? And do you see that as being a long-term problem for our country?
The answer is yes, I see it as a long-term problem, but if you go back and look at the poll results, not the more granular polls, not who's going to win, who's going to lose, they're always wrong. But if you go back and look at the polls, as they polled individuals about the issues, on the left and on the right, distrust of government is paramount. Bernie Sanders doesn't trust government anymore. I'm trying to find out somebody I could use other than President Trump, but President-elect Trump, but Bernie Sanders, from whence he comes, he doesn't trust government, and the people on the right don't trust government. Now it's also perpetuated a great deal by social media, because now it is so, I'll use the word toxic again, caustic if you want to, But social media really has a way to, particularly young people, you know, lead them to believe things that might not be true. But I think you still convene, you still reach out, and on a personal level, in my opinion, it's where you can be most effective. And also the last thing is, I don't lead with the fact that the government's the solution. In fact, if you look at these community engagement, whether it's building schools or whether it's a fentanyl issue, I'm not looking for government to solve the problem. On the contrary, we're convening around an issue, but we're trying to find solutions to that, and the government might play a very small part in that solution. So, which is, I think, another reason for, you know, convening around issues in the community where you can agree on it, because you're not necessarily waiting for government to solve that issue. So I can see why people distrust government on the left and the right, frankly. And I've lost a great deal of confidence in government. So I think it begs the question that maybe it's even better to convene around issues in your own community rather than just let the world make that decision for you.
I'm going to put a colleague, Dr. Jay Barth, on the spot because I enjoy doing that. But on a serious note, you referenced your daughter is she a college student, high school student? 26. Jay, can you talk a little bit about some of the civic engagement, civic dialogue programs that we, the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton Library, together have really doubled down on this issue of giving young people, students, the tools to learn how to have civic engagement, civic dialogue. Jay, you want to talk a little bit about those efforts?
Yeah, and I think there are two sides to this. Is of course one piece is some focus around civic knowledge, and where Dick, you said earlier, you know, that there are certain things that are true where there can be consensus, and I do think that is a place where if folks can gain some confidence that they share knowledge, that can be a jumping off point for some conversations that are actually more beneficial and potentially lead to more enhanced trust about those institutions when there is a sense that these institutions all have histories. They're not coming out of thin air. There's something is there. The other piece, of course, is civic engagement and really helping, you know, people of all ages, but especially young people, really figure out what their distinctive skills and talents are when it comes to engaging with these institutions. And I do agree, Dick, that the local level often is a place where the point of entry is the easiest, the barriers are the lowest, and where some of the trust remains the highest, because it is your neighbors who are in charge of those institutions rather than folks who are so easy to stereotype, you know, at the state or national level. So those are just a few initial thoughts, but we're really, you know, giving folks those tools around knowledge, but also around what their distinctive skills and talents are.
That's what I meant to say. But one point, though, back to the point we both made, people are intimidated by the process if they don't understand it. So if you're intimidated by it, you're distrustful of it. So the more that you learn about how the process works and how you can access the process, you're not as intimidated by it, and it's not as distrustful of it.
I'm going to put another colleague. This is a little self-promotional. Joy, you run a program or helped institute a program that we have a grant from the Carnegie Foundation specifically about helping kids and people not be intimidated by the process. Talk a little bit about some of those programs and what you're planning for the future.
Thanks, Stephanie. So yeah, we got a major grant from Carnegie. So it's Arkansas Civics. So we're focused on, you know, I'm really big on pilots because I like to get data first before we do a huge statewide program. But the dream is, because, you know, we are 15 presidential libraries across the country, and Arkansas is very lucky to have one right in the middle of the country. And so, you know, we really found our lane because of the Arkansas Health, the Civic Health Index, which was released in December. showed that Arkansas ranks last in voter participation, voter registration.
How sad.
So we looked at those findings to figure out how to build this program for Arkansas civics. And so one of it is, again, like you said, building that trust, because those students don't realize this is a federal entity. So if they know people in their community running these programs, hopefully that can help build trust. And then also with the election process, a lot of people were not told how to do that in school. How do you vote? How do you register? People are often intimidated by, the actual voting
Process, yeah.
the machines. How do you do that? Because people don't want to feel stupid, or so we put that in place. Like we have a partnership with the Secretary of State's office to show young adults how you can vote, how you register, how you do absentee voting, how you work the machines. I think empowering people, giving them knowledge on how the process works is a big thing. So hopefully, we can expand to, the ultimate dream is to have every ninth grade student come through here to learn about civic engagement, civic participation. But we're going to start with 6 districts over the next 2 years. And hopefully we can help move the needle, because we are at the bottom. We can only go up from here. So hopefully we can show some real progress when they do this new study again in 2 years, 3 years.
Well, I'm going to ask the last question, because when we have these programs, we like to close with a sort of a call to action. Go forth and bridge build. So if you were to give one clarion call to action for this group today on how they go forth in bridge build, what would it be?
I think the last comment was a very good example. Pick something in the community that you can get involved in, and also with some degree of passion, right? You get involved with some degree of passion. So I would just look, and you're reading the news all the time, or you watch the news, have conversation, you know the issues that are going on. I mean, keep in mind that Hillary Clinton started out as a child advocate. That's where she started, as a child advocate in the community. So find an issue in the community that's important to you, that you've got some emotional attachment to, and get involved in that level. And again, don't be intimidated by the process. And people can teach you the process too, so you're not intimidated by the process. Maybe we can't do anything about your distrust of government at this point in time, but the closer you can get to understand the process and how you can utilize your voice. I mean, how can my voice be heard? Reach across the aisle. How can my voice be heard? Acknowledge that other person has an opinion too that has to be validated. And so I would choose an issue to get involved in. And I think the last example is a perfect one, because you're enabling people, you're empowering people. It's what it's all about. And you can be around an issue, empower people to address a solution. People want to be empowered. They want to be, they want their opinion to count, and they want to be empowered, and ergo, after that empowerment as a group, you get things done.
Great. Thank you for a wonderful and
Thank
very
you very
timely
much. Thank you.
conversation. Please join me in thanking
Thank you very much.
Dick.
Thank you.
And I wanted to remind you that we have these books available for sale in the museum store, and I believe you're going to be signing some of these. And it's a great and easy read, very practical toolkit, a great holiday gift as well. So
And very inexpensive.
very inexpensive.
Democratic.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank all of you for joining. I want to thank all of our visitors who are joining us online. We have all of our programs, as you all know, we do in person, but we also have them available to watch today, and go to our YouTube channel to watch programs you may have missed. So thanks again, and thank you, Dick.
Thank you very much.
All right.
Thank you.